All right. Today, we are talking about how we measure impact or want to measure impact. And we already kind of got started, and then I hit record. So we're just going to keep going. Um, so, Katie, thanks for these initial thoughts on um, how you're thinking it makes the most sense to measure your impact with Rethink and Reconnect. The way that I think this format will work best in this small group is going to be to basically do that initially. So, say initially, here are my thoughts, what I'm trying to do, and what I think makes sense to measure to know that we're doing that we're having the effect that we want to have. And then we kind of go around and we do it for each person. And then because I work so intuitively, I think what will happen is I'll start to pull out some themes of like, okay, these are the kinds of things that work really well about these KPIs. Here are the ones that I think might be really hard to track. Or what if we tried tracking this and that? And like, how granular should we get? And I do want to get into that kind of conversation, right? Because it can also be like a black hole to like get ultra granular about measuring every single thing. And that's also not the point, but the point of measuring our impact is, like I said before I started recording, to be able to report on the results that we're getting, which allows us to unlock funding, to recruit, hyper talented people. It allows us to do all sorts of cool stuff when we are proving to the world that we're having the impact that we say we want to have. So, Jan, let's jump to you, if that's cool with you. So I just pulled this from your Impact Alliance profile, branding energetics for servant leaders to help you align your brand with your purpose. Tell us a little bit more. This is a sort of consultancy business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does it have a name?
It's just J. Camille Co.
J. Camille Co.
hmm Yep.
Cool. Um, how, so have you measured your impact in this kind of this kind of work so far?
Yeah. I like the prompt of this meeting because it's giving me a prompt to like actually put this down and line item it out visually. But I guess the things that I would be able to measure would be um, conversions, like how many existing brands or existing businesses have I converted to a more sustainable model or a more ethical model to kind of leave the current, maybe toxic, maybe not sustainable ways of operation or even marketing that they had. So, like, how many have I been able to convert? And my favorite one to measure is how many young adults, whether student or not student, whether that be high school or college, have I converted into basically being confident and trying the entrepreneur thing. In early in my business, my focus was less on getting as many clients as possible, and it was more empowering and recruiting as many young people as possible. So um, as a lead generator to get maybe like interns or to hire younger employees, I would do workshops. That was my first practice in workshops. And based on the attendees of the workshops, I did measure that, how many maybes were there, so I could kind of gauge like that generation's confidence in it. How many
Mm-hmm.
did attend and take action? So this is like stuff that I take from MailChimp basically. And how many out of all of that, after all of those metrics, like actually ended up joining my team and how long they stayed. So I guess that's more exciting for me because it's very like people related, very empowering. As far as the clients go, it's literally just how many did I convert from one version of their business to a new and improved version.
And is there sort of like a definite, is there like a finish line for the business conversion side where it's like,
Mhm.
Yes, we have successfully reached the point where we can say this is now a case study.
Yes. Basically, it's a time and date. It's the point where we hit publish after like redeveloping like the website, because all the marketing stuff like follows suit. Yes, like before, during, and after. But the time and day where they literally hit publish, we're now live. This is 2.0.
Cool.
Mhm.
Okay, awesome. This is a great start. Mr. French, you have a couple. We can go with either. Um, I am particularly curious to hear about humanity by design, and I think that folks on this call would be as well. So we can always circle back to Impact Alliance sort of all together, since we're all sort of co-creating that one. Um, but give us a sense. I should know this better than I do, but with your microphone enabled,
Um,
preferably.
humanity by design. How's the audio, by the way,
Pretty good.
on these new headphones? Cool. So for humanity by design, we design, we do research, product design, and grant funding help and media development for people operating in the mental health and resilience space. And yeah, that's pretty much what we do. We're operating outside of that space as well, just because that's where things have flowed. But um, mostly we're focused on bringing research around how to prevent anxiety, how to prevent depression, how to, basically research into how to, prevent these things from happening and treat them when they do happen, and bridging it into the consumer market. Whether through products, services, interventions, whatever you want to call it. So with us, I would say a KPI could definitely be articles published, or not articles, research, published peer reviewed research from our projects. Because that is basically building the knowledge out there in mental health. And if we're publishing an article from something that we review, that means that we've gone through the process of making sure that the intervention, product, or service is actually improving mental health. And Yeah, so I would say that is one potential KPI. It would probably be better to have the whole team here, but this is just kind of my view of it. Another KPI could be number of people reached through the interventions that we've worked with. So for example, one of the co-founders, Ryan, his intervention, Compass for Courage, has been directly interacted with and utilized by around 3,000 kids so far. And based on his research, they're 80% less likely to develop anxiety after going through the intervention. So it's kind of a case by case basis. It's kind of this like ripple effect of, we work with them, now they have research to validate that their thing actually works. And if the research says it doesn't work, then we help them make it work. And then they would go to market and have some level of effect that's similar-ish to what the research showed the effect is. So it would really be people reached by interventions after we worked with those interventions. So those would be the two ones. I guess like those are like specific to the work that we have, like we have control of. There's always this question of scoping with, or like systemic KPI could be like what percentage of people who need some form of mental health care actually receive it, and of the people who receive it, what percentage of that care is high quality. I think that's like the big, can we make a dent in this metric, because right now those numbers are super low. It's pretty bad. So that's, yeah, those are solid top three. Just like, again, this is just off the top of my head, but hopefully that moves the discussion forward.
Yeah, well, let's dive into that a little bit more, right? Because we have a couple types of metrics here just from these three examples so far. We have the sort of what I would call like the direct metrics.
Katie thought of a few more in the chat. If you saw those, if you want to copy and paste those in.
Actions taken by participants as a result of the experience. Love that. And number of stories shared that have implications for others to learn from. Yeah, so perfect. So in each of these cases, we have sort of the direct impact of the thing we're doing, right? So and then there's sort of like the ripple effect metrics. There's like that next layer. And like taking this for example, so like humanity by design can easily measure it is very straightforward to measure the number of published peer review research articles, and it is relatively straightforward, I'd say, to measure the number of people reached through client interventions, as long as the tracking is being done well and everything. But then when you get to like the percentage of people needing mental health care who are receiving it at a high level of quality, that's obviously not something that you can, like, you're not the only ones working on it. And because you're not directly delivering that, it's sort of tied to this second one here. So these two here, damn it. Oh my God. These two here are relatively, they're tied together. But that third component is sort of like, it's like if the world of social impact had a dashboard, that bottom one is one that we can all check into. Anybody who's working on mental health, right, can check in. So there's, yeah, it's like that systemic KPI, that systemic metric. And so I'm curious to hear your thoughts, all of you, on how we can, like, I don't know that it's possible to get an extremely accurate number here, but certainly we can get better and better over time. But what do you guys think about that, about measuring that big number, the thing that is something that many companies are working towards, many movements are working towards?
I would say cross-referencing maybe separate real-time statistics, like number of people who claim that they need it and number of people who are satisfied with the care that they've received, and then kind of whatever the math is for that kind of overlap.
Cross-referencing those metrics, various players, or I want to say stakeholders.
Because the stat here is specifically number of people who need mental health care that are receiving it high quality. So I feel like those would be attainable, kind of like broken up as two separate metrics, and then however whatever the algebra is to kind of conjoin that to get this answer.
No, that's a really good point. I think there are actually three, right? There are three separate things that need to be studied, and each metric has its own layers of complexity, which just makes it a crazy fucking task. So like one, the number of people, the percentage of people, or like number, you could say like number of people who need mental health care. It would be like actual number, how many people need mental health care, what percentage of them are receiving it. And then out of that percentage, what percentage are receiving it? The way they talk about this in the NIH is the minimal acceptable level of care, which is like, sounds like a low bar to me.
Say that again.
So that's not the minimally accepted standard of care. So to give you a sense of where it's at right now, 30% of the people who are receiving care get the minimally accepted standard of care. So like 30% is above the bar being like, hey, if you're below this, it's probably terrible. Only 30% people are above that bar. Crazy.
If we say, and real quick, just for the sake of this particular conversation, when we're talking about there's mental health care, which is a huge umbrella, which also includes like mental illness, but mental illness is sort of a unique thread within that. And then there's like mental health as a whole, right? Like 350 million Americans. How do you decide who needs mental health care?
Right. I mean, people exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, I would say. People
Okay,
who are, yeah, experiencing
Um,
symptoms of mental illness.
or just say everybody.
right. That's why I think it would be valuable to differentiate. And because I've had it sort of slapped in my face that mental health and mental illness are not to be conflated, that they are similar but different.
Right.
So if we say mental illness care, right, and then we have a number of people who are sort of either officially diagnosed or professionally deemed to exhibit symptoms, professionally
Which is,
deemed.
I would just say diagnosed. I would just say diagnosed.
Okay.
Adam, are you purposely limiting it to diagnosed because of the work you're doing? Because I'm just thinking of all of us who, I mean, there's so many of us walking around undiagnosed because it's at this point and knowing that down here it's going to explode.
Yeah. I mean, you literally just pointed out the fact that the current way we think about mental health is kind of broken. The entire way we think about it is kind of like everyone, like anxiety, right? A lot of people are like, oh, I experience anxiety. That's a bad thing. Anxiety is a part of the human experience. And this comes from someone who has studied childhood anxiety for pretty much his whole career. Not me, but my friend said that, so this kind of pokes at the complexity of these systemic level KPIs, because we have the KPI depends on how people perceive the condition or problem, and the way we collectively as a society perceive mental health and mental illness doesn't seem to reflect the reality of the nature of those things. Just to like, even to the point of calling it mental health. Like when we're saying mental health, we're actually referencing a complex mental and emotional system in our bodies that touch most of our organs, and it is not just in our head, but that's how our society thinks. We're all in our head as a society. So it's just like, this is kind of like where I like throw my hands up and say like, like I don't really know, like I don't have the answers. Like we're trying to measure things in systems that kind of need to evolve, to make them better. So it's like, what is the KPI for that? Do we even have KPIs for like, like what's the KPI for the evolution of how we as a society view mental health, right? Like we kind of have to think about that if we're going to come up with KPIs around mental health, because as Katie is exploring in her work, it's like we need to always be questioning and evolving our views on the systems themselves if we are going to evolve at the pace needed to solve these problems. So yeah, I know I just dug us into a big wormhole, but Jeremy, I don't know where
We're gonna
get from there.
No, this is a great start, and like this is just the beginning of this topic, this conversation. So let's put a.
Can I add one thing to this?
Sure.
Because I love what you said, and I think there's a place for KPIs kind of across a spectrum. I'm just looking at mental health and resilience entrepreneurs. There's this, we each have a lot of hard that lead to mental illness or wellness. And then we have offsetting, positive things to oversimplify it, right? And as those get out of whack, our mental illness or wellness responds. And so there may be like a continuum of KPIs somehow that looks at these things that are kind of further upstream, contributing to preventing us getting to the point where we get diagnosed.
Yes, I love that you brought that up. The sort of leading indicators versus lagging indicators, right? So like what are some leading indicators that somebody is heading towards clinical depression? And if we can measure those leading indicators, we can actually prevent some or most or all of those people from reaching that clinical state of depression. Is that what you're describing? Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's I could talk about this stuff all day. We do have 7 minutes and 20 seconds left. So for this particular session, and I scheduled it for 40 minutes specifically because I knew that we were going to have 40 minutes on Zoom. And I think that's a good way to just like get things started without consuming our entire day, because I think we could all sit here and talk about this stuff all day. So to go back to rethink and reconnect, because right now we're in a space where it's like we're sort of talking very systemically. Again, we have the directly reported metrics from the participants of Rethink and Reconnect experiences. So reporting feeling motivated, feeling like they have an actionable item to act on after the sessions, which leads into the actions taken by the participants, right? These feelings and tangible commitment are something that you, Katie, can totally measure in like survey form or just like anecdotally throughout the sessions at the end of the in-person session, and ask people to sort of self-report, but also sort of objectively, what are the tangible commitments? What are the things that we're each committing to do differently? And how are we going to like sort of hold ourselves accountable and be accountable together to those things? And then there's the after the fact, staying in touch with those participants, right? And checking in and hearing what kinds of actions are being done. And that's where we get into the ripple effects. I see you say social media activity by participants, hashtags. Okay, so like social listening, like basically whether they used a hashtag or maybe you're just like following the accounts of the participants of your sessions to use social media as a way to see how they're implementing those things.
Or is the conversation just growing?
Is the conversation growing? Okay, that's a big one. Okay, that's what you were talking about here. Number of stories shared / maybe conversations had.
And maybe is the movement growing too? There's something, and I don't know what that would look like.
Yeah. The growth of the movement itself. So like for, any consultancy, like Humanity by Design, or for Jan, number of clients, client referrals, right? That type of stuff is obviously a leading indicator that things are going well. But yeah, so I don't know. In the last few minutes, like I would like to just like tie enough of a bow on this initial conversation that it's not like in my head for the rest of the day, because I have a lot of other stuff to
do. Sorry.
No, this is fantastic. But I guess to you all, what strikes you as the an action item that you can take away? Like, how can this help you in your projects that you're working on right now? Like maybe it's just choosing one KPI that is relatively easy to track, or something that feels the most meaningful in your business, and just like developing a clear process on how to get an accurate number about that.
The thing that stuck out to me most from the email for this meeting was, can you measure too much? And right now, as I was taking notes for this from this call, I wrote down, all the questions we asked, like what that you asked me, like what are things you've measured? What can you turn into a case study? What's the turning point that you've reached that conversion goal? And then when we did the breakdown for Adam's example, that like what are the metric components that make up the KPI breakdown? But even thinking of that, I reverse engineered it and to the kind of like, what's the point? So value proposition questions that I think are really going to help me with this assignment is, who are the KPIs for? Which KPIs matter to the target audience or audiences? And what do they need these metrics for? AKA, how does this data serve and add value to them? Even if it's us, whether it's internal or external or both.
I love that. Thank you for bringing it to that direction. And I haven't even had a chance to do this for myself. So like after the session, I'm taking 15 minutes to sort of digest and do this exercise for myself as well. But yeah, it's like when our reason for existing and our reason for being in business is to help a certain group of people, if we're not factoring in, like if we're going to ask ourselves, if I can only have one KPI above my computer every single day that I look at, if I had to only pick one, which one would I pick? If we're not at least factoring in the idea that it might be the one that matters the most to the group we're trying to help, then we definitely should be. So thank you for that personally. And yeah, I think the other answer that I have to this question is like what should we start measuring? It goes back to that leading indicator of success. Before we can have impact, we have to have buy-in from somebody to want to go through our process and have the impact. So obviously, like for people who are a little bit farther ahead, who have already done that work and have developed some research, some case studies, etc. But for those of us who are much earlier in the process, who don't necessarily have the research to do, I would say we should start at the first thing. So like for Katie, and we're going to talk about this next week, like how do we just get people to start tuning in to the group and expressing interest in the events? That is sort of like the first metric that will snowball into the other ones. And for Jan, like you said, interest in the workshops that you're hosting for the young adults to try entrepreneurship, and also some sort of leading indicator of success for the brands that you're working with. So maybe it's something to the effect around like how much are they buying into the process while you're helping them convert to this more sustainable model. So I'm going to share this page with you all. I'm going to drop it in the event link as well. But thank you for joining. Like we're going to get kicked out in less than a minute. So does anybody have any last thoughts to share?